and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here, and I feel very inspired by all the things your organization is doing. And Patty, that was a really nice way to start my day, seeing those beautiful images. So I will share my screen here. And I just like to say thank you so much for inviting me to share my work with you. My work has been described as narrative, storytelling, documentation of everyday occurrences, recording history, and detailing memories. Color and form are the foundations. This is my story. I was born in Akron, Ohio, and I'm the youngest of 4 sisters. I was always encouraged and supported by my family to do my art. I was constantly making furniture and clothes for my dolls. My best gift anytime was a brand new box of crayons and a pad of paper. I still find myself holding my finger like this when I work. I got my BS in art education at Bowling Green State University in Ohio in 1974. That's where my interest in metalsmithing really blossomed. I studied with Hal Hesselschwert, a dedicated teacher and artist known for his exuberant colors and patterns in enameling, combined with his delicate and exotic constructions in jewelry. This is a mace Hal made for the university and carried with white gloves for many years at graduation ceremonies. It took more than 550 hours to create this piece in 1964. It was during my senior year at Bowling Green that an exuberant instructor was hired to teach in the metals department. His name was Chuck Evans. Chuck turned the place on its ear. He made sure we were aware of things going on in the metals field. He was a great teacher, and I appreciated his candor and devotion to his students. He taught at BGSU for 6 years and went on to open the metals program at Iowa State University. He wrote the textbook, Jewelry, Contemporary Design and Technique in 1983. I was accepted into graduate metals program at Indiana University and studied with Professor Emeritus Alma Eicherman. She changed my life, and I'm forever grateful to her for opening my eyes to so many things. This is where I learned much about design, forming, and fabricating metal, the history of metals, and so much more. I got my MFA in 1977. While in grad school, I was making hollowware and using heat coloration on my riddled series, including this teapot. I was achieving all sorts of rich colors. There were pinks, reds, purples, greens, and more, all done in the oven. 1 year after I graduated with my MFA from Indiana University, I was offered a job at Bowling Green State University. I replaced my professor, Chuck Evans, when he moved on to teach at Iowa State University. I continued my exploration of heat coloration on copper. I began using rivets as a surface embellishment. This was the riddled series. I began to make 2 identical forms in copper, covered them with rivets, and used them to sandwich plexiglass and other materials. The form on the bottom mirrors the one on the top. The rivets are gradually taller as the bump gets higher. There are 250 rivets on each side of this piece. This box really shows how the rivets change in height. This process achieves beautiful color, but I stopped using it because it was so fragile. The color would change with a single fingerprint. Meanwhile, in 1981, I met my husband, Jack da Silva, from California. He went to Indiana University to study after I graduated. And that's where we met when I went to visit Miss Eicherman. In 1981, or I'm sorry, Jack's a very talented metalsmith and teacher. We both work very differently, which is a good thing in my opinion, but we're always available for critiques and technical assistance for each other and plenty of laughs. And we enjoy our travels together. In 1981 to 83, Jack taught at Kumon University in Seoul, Korea. I went as an artist in residence for 10 weeks. While I was there, the faculty and students gave us a wonderful engagement party, complete with traditional garments, food, gifts, and singing. The event took place in a restored nobleman's home on the campus. We surprised everyone by wearing traditional Korean clothing. Then we flew back to the States to get married. In 1987, I accepted a job at California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland. So we moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. California was a big change from Ohio, to say the least. I have become a California girl. This is a view of the Jewelry Metal Art Studio at CCA in Oakland, where I began teaching in 1987. Our school has 2 campuses. We are in the process of building a new building at our San Francisco campus, which will unite the college and put all the programs into one campus. The pandemic slowed the progress, and hopefully it'll be completed in 3 years. In the meantime, last summer, Jewelry and Metal Arts program moved to a temporary location in our San Francisco campus until the new building will be completed. This is our new temporary space. I currently teach with great teachers and artists, Curtis Sarima, Deborah Logier, David Cole, and Joanne Donovan, who is not pictured here. We have a strong program and very talented students. In 1989, Jack and I bought our first house in Oakland. Even back then, there was tremendous sticker shock after living in Ohio. We put much sweat and tears into renovating this bungalow. At the time, my work was starting to change along with my choice of colors. I was drawn to artists like de Chirico, Rousseau, and Magritte, just to name a few, whose color palettes and imagery really spoke to me. I especially responded to Magritte and de Chirico's play with scale, perspective, and the juxtaposition of unrelated elements. It was during that time that the book, The Coloring, Bronzing, and Patination of Metal by Richard Hughes and Michael Rose came out. Chemical patinas became the rage. I loved the colors, but not the idea of using so many chemicals. So I began experimenting with different alternatives like gesso and colored pencil on metal. This approach became my signature. Gesso comes in many colors. The color of gesso I use is critical. It determines the mood of my pieces. In each of my works, I also try to create a mood with my color palette and the pencils I use. When applying colored pencil with or without gesso, the surface should be sandblasted. The metal needs to have a tooth. Each of the square samples by the gesso swatch has the same 3 colored pencils layered on them. You can see how different each one is because of the gesso. My favorite gesso is Burnt Umber, which is the second from the right. This is my collection of colored pencils. I found it to be very helpful to categorize them by hue. I'm always adding to my choices. One of my favorite painting teachers always said, never use the paint right out of the tube. I keep this in mind as I start my coloration. Then I layer and layer and layer. This is a jump from my cigar box of crayons. My early gesso and colored pencil series was titled Above and Beyond. This was a large sculpture covered in gesso, which has been textured with a plastic fork. The surface was then colored with brown shoe polish and embellished with colored pencil. I was having fun trying different variables on the gesso surface. In the later pieces in the series, I started incorporating different forms and materials, which were part of what stabilized the piece. And they were also the beginning of my use of narrative elements. In 1991, I was invited to be in a traveling exhibition titled Arsenal, Aggression and Jewelry at the Museum für Kunsthandwerk in Frankfurt, Germany. I made this piece called The Devil's Garden. There are 7 hat pins averaging 10 to 12 inches in height, dancing back and forth. They are threaded through bits of tubing in the fence and touching down to a red dot like a pinprick on a base of a chiseled wood and recycled lead sheet. Each pin is made of copper and stainless steel, embellished with tacks, nails, and pins that were encouraged to rust. This was an important piece for me. It marked a turning point in my approach to metal, which became more direct and expressive. My coloration became more muted, eliminating the use of primer and feathering the color to expose the metal. In 1992, I was working on large vessels. These are about 18 inches tall. The surfaces were done with sand mixed in the gesso and then colored with colored pencil. Dwelling 1 was made in memory of our first dog, Archie, who died while I was making it. The back has a closed door for him, and the front has an open door for our next dog, Avalon. The piece on the right was inspired by the Hale-Bopp comet. The comet was last seen by people building the pyramids. I watched it every night as I walked our dogs and wondered what the next group of people would be doing when it returned. My dad had just passed away, but it made me feel good that he would have an even better view of the comet. This was the beginning of my becoming a narrative artist, telling stories through my work. On March 23rd, 1993, we were burned out of our house. The experience was indescribable. Jack was at home and barely made it out safely with our young dog, Lonnie. Suddenly, one's priorities are reaffirmed, and material things mean nothing when those you care about are in danger. We learn much about the sense of loss and confusion, the love of family and friends, and about ourselves. Once past the initial shock of the fire, we unfortunately learned more than we ever wanted to know about insurance companies, contractors, and attorneys. I began to make a series of candle snuffers that go beyond their function conceptually, and each group tells a story. They are titled, Put Out the Fire. They are not small, nor are they intended to be demure in any way. They were made singularly, in pairs, and in groups of 3 to 4. Anytime you see a snake in these pieces, it represents an insurance company. These were the first of the candle snuffers. They show our house on fire in the middle, our house in repair on the right, and our dream house. We were 3 weeks into escrow selling our house when the fire happened. Each group of snuffers had a theme relating to the fire. This group was the Magician series because I thought it was going to take magic to get our house repaired. It took 2 years. Taken to the Cleaners talks about the clothing we lost, for which we were not reimbursed. The dress and coat are made of pewter. The snake comes out of the bucket instead of water. There are flames in the jacket's pockets. Meanwhile, the dress tries to catch dollar bills with a hole in her net as a snake crawls up the handle. The subtitle on this snuffer is, When Our Ship Comes In, Where Does It Go? The hose turns into a snake as the bucket loses water and the ship goes down the vortex. I realized when I completed this snuffer that it was a sad love story where the snake fell in love with the ribbon on the hat, only to have it taken away by the birds that are trying to protect their nest, represented by the hat. In all, I made 24 snuffers. In addition to making candle snuffers, I was making candle holders. It seemed appropriate at the time. These candelabras were made from everyday plumbing parts, kind of like a blue-collar version of silver ones in fancy homes. This was in response to having to replace all the plumbing when repairing our house after the fire. The one on the right shows how organized we were with all our insurance and legal paperwork after the fire. Each paper was ironed into the shape of a house and placed in the laundry basket. You know something is about to go awry when there's a scorch mark on the page and the cord of the iron turns into a snake. The other candelabrum shows an exercise in futility with a scattering and wadding up of letters, all fallen from the line. Some are made into paper airplanes and shot into the wastebasket, while others line the bottom of an empty bird cage with the door left open. The message here is that there is a fine line between order and chaos. In 1995, the Jewish Museum San Francisco sponsored a large menorah invitational with works by 123 artists in all three-dimensional media. I decided to base my work on things I had in common with my friends who were Jewish: the importance of family, home, community, and faith. The tallest holder was a beehive representing family, home, and community. There are 1 or 2 bees on each of the other holders. Each holder is approximately 3 inches by 7 inches and depicts everyday elements in our lives. Each of them is colored with gesso and colored pencil, but maintain the feeling of copper as the dominant metal. I also made candle holders for my favorite kind of candles, birthday candles. You can use them in a cake, or if on a diet, leave them in their holder to make it look like a real piece of chocolate cake made of copper with gesso and colored pencil and sterling silver. I have a real love of making functional objects, especially teapots. Continuing with the cake theme, I made a teapot that looks like a piece of wedding cake made of copper with gesso and colored pencil and sterling silver. The 2 chairs on top are intended to remind the bride and groom to have a seat and enjoy the ride. In the mid-90s came the pears. I was amazed at what a natural transition was possible between a pear and a teapot. As I worked on my pear series, it was like doing small figure drawings 3-dimensionally. I made 24 in all, and most of them were in pears, no pun intended. I felt like the pear forms took on personalities and characteristics, not unlike people we know. This pair of pears speaks to all those who join in what others might consider an unlikely union. The small green pear is assertive and on the move. The purple one is laid back and in no hurry. There are sometimes small doorways on the pears, also making them dwellings. These are made of copper and are colored with gesso and colored pencil. The pair of pears continued with a variety of forms, patterns, gestures, and color, including these harlequin pears, which are gold-plated and colored with gesso and colored pencil. This image was used on the cover of Metalsmith magazine. This teapot talks about the game we played as kids called rock, paper, scissors. The entire teapot is made of sterling silver. It stands 7 inches tall and is 10 inches wide. I forged the scissors from 5/8-inch sterling silver rod. The playing cards are colored with enamel paint. This teapot telling a story about a small tea party happening in the trees. And this is my most recent teapot, which was inspired by wallpaper. I go back and forth between making jewelry and objects. In many ways, there's not much difference except in scale. I love any opportunity to form metal, fabricate the parts, and play with the surfaces. Maker's Chalice was made for an exhibition of women metalsmiths. The dress is placed in a park-like situation. When examining it closer, the dress becomes a statue, or is the statue turning into fabric? There's a pair of scissors and 2 bricks on the ground and 2 cast brown birds holding up a stove grate supporting the silver cup. This speaks to the strength and fragility of women as makers. The 2 second nature chalices are intended to focus in on a small part of the world around us that we are often too busy to notice or appreciate. The songbirds peek out from a tangle of grasses and flowers. They stand 8 inches tall. As you have seen, I love birds, but I'm not a bird watcher or a birder. What I've come to learn is that they watch us more than we watch them. These amazing creatures have always fascinated me. I've had canaries since I was old enough to save my money to buy my first one. We have a large cage in our house, and at one point we had up to 13 canaries. Singing got quite loud at times. This was the first piece I made where the bird became the main player in the piece. This indigo bunting is carrying away a small golden bird in a cage. It represents a time when my mother had a stroke and I had to bring her beloved canary home with me from Boston because she couldn't care for it. I was going to title it Thief of the Golden Song, but Jack said no, I was the steward of the golden song. I used hands as the shadows in 14-gauge brass because in most cases, birds hate to be handled. I showed this piece for the first time when I was selected Master Metalsmith at the National Ornamental Metals Museum in 1999. This piece, Journey, is 17 inches tall. I use the raven because it means different things in different cultures. This raven has 3 chairs, one for my mother who had a stroke, one for Jack's mother who passed away, and one for my colleague and friend at school who passed away. All of this happened within a period of 2 weeks, and it got to the point where I was afraid to answer the phone. It made me ask the question, when is it our turn to ride on this raven's back? This piece is about Hans Christiansen's story of the Emperor's Nightingale. It talks about the difference between technology, the music box, and nature, the nightingale. This Eastern bluebird mother is teaching her fledgling about cats as a shadow appears beneath them. Will she be in time? This warbler is looking to the future, tucking away its dollar bills. The nest was fabricated, etched, and then electroformed before coloring. This piece was made for a show at the National Ornamental Metals Museum for an exhibit about wheels. Loosely translated, Tamagotchi means egg vehicle in Japanese. The bird, a Middendorf's grasshopper warbler, which is almost extinct because of man's carelessness, is pulling a blown glass egg, obviously not its own. Whose is it, and who's in control here? The wheel works and everything comes apart. This is a piece I started before 9/11 and finished afterward. 9/11 put a whole different spin on the concept of the piece. The chairs represent people and the eggs represent hopes and dreams. The European starling, a prolific bird in New York, is about to land or take off. Will the house of cards survive? In 2001, I began making books. They were perfect stages for my stories. This was my first book piece. Susan Cummins invited artists who showed at her gallery and who used birds in their work to make self-portraits. I had surgery on my nose because of some skin cancer. After wearing a bandage for weeks, I felt very self-conscious. So I picked a dowitcher with its long beak as my bird. She's wading through the water, choosing between the house, which represented home, the anvil representing my art, and the book representing my teaching. Each book that I will be showing you has one object under the corner of the book relating to the theme. The birds on each book are actual size. This book rests on a paintbrush representing my artwork. The covers are 14 gauge copper, and the pages are made from red oak flooring. Threadbare, a collection of short stories, was also done after my nose surgery. This warbler is either sewing the eggs in the linen or trying to retrieve them. The scissors are a hybrid between embroidery scissors and surgical scissors. I was getting pretty good at making scissors at that point. There's a lot of construction to my work that is not evident to the viewer. For example, the wooden eggs under the surface are being held in place by a metal structure attached to the inside of the book cover. I made this piece, The Invisible Me, after my purse was stolen out of my office. I used a mockingbird because they are known to steal other birds' songs. I included 17 vintage lock plates and a key to tell this story. The ruler under the corner was given to some little kid at a bank many years ago. There's a place on the ruler that says, "This ruler belongs to," and the little kid's name was scratched out, just like my identity. This piece was made, this book, Question of Survival, features a Virginia rail, a shy, elusive water bird who comes across a suitcase filled with eggs. Will she get involved or let the snakes take them? This piece was made right after 9/11. This piece was made for a chair show at Mobilia Gallery. I selected the nursery rhyme, "Sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie." When you think about it, the rhyme is rather gruesome, with the nose being pecked off and then sewn back on. This was also made after my nose surgery. It stands 17 inches tall. I was invited to take part in a pillbox exhibition. This piece, Reap What You Sow, a Prescription for Life, was about the fact that I found out I was allergic to penicillin. Also, at that time, the nation was being affected by the high cost of prescription drugs. The bird is either planting the pills or removing them from the ground. The plants are small hands grasping at the pills. The choice of bird was a barn swallow for obvious reasons. The spine of the book pulls out to become a 7-day pillbox. A vintage spoon with the engraved word Grove pulls up the corner of the book. I have always loved reading a good mystery. Agatha Christie inspired this book, Beauty Secrets. Something has happened and the human presence is gone. All that's left is a skull and 2 wigs cast in bronze, and a stool which has been knocked over. The rascally ravens are trying to steal the jewelry in the drawer, and another one is running away with a key. A comb holds up the corner of the book. This book, The Trouble with Magic, shows a stage where a magician's act has gone awry. Rabbits keep coming out of the hats, the doves are escaping, and all that's left of the magician are his gloves and a magic wand holding up the corner of the book. The rabbits and doves are cast in bronze. I was invited to be in a show at the Meadows Museum where we were asked to select one piece from their permanent collection and make a piece inspired by it. I chose this old bronze peacock frame with a tin-type image of a little girl in a white dress and straw hat holding a book. I deconstructed the elements and removed any human presence. Then I brought the peacock to life. It stands on the straw hat with the book as it instructs the floating ghost-like dress form. A writing pen holds up the corner of the book. This smaller book I made as I wondered what it'd be like to have a twin. I was amazed at how tedious it was to make the harnesses with the chased wings and attach them to the dresses. I managed to do it with small rivets. A brass feather is under the book. Changing Tides was made after Hurricane Sandy decimated the New Jersey coast. This was also a time when many people's mortgages were going underwater. The sandpiper stands on shore looking out to sea as the houses float away. Meanwhile, a crab sneaks up from behind to the one remaining house. All the smaller elements on top of the book are fabricated. The beach was created by adding sand to the gesso. A glass bottle holds up the corner. This next piece includes my favorite story, Alice in Wonderland, and my favorite flowers, Impatience. This book, Time Lost in Wonderland, is about Alice in Wonderland and the mystery she encountered in her dream. The rabbit's head popping out of its hole was raised from a 6-inch sterling disc. There are over 60 flowers in this piece. A vintage hand mirror holds up the corner, and an antique watch is nestled in the flowers. In 2004, I was asked to write a chapter for the Penland Book of Jewelry. It features chapters by 10 different metal artists. It was an interesting challenge, and I was glad to be part of it. It has become a great resource for anyone interested in my process. I made 2 new pieces to be included in the chapter. The inspiration for these pieces was based on an old engraving done for a bird identification book titled Homes Without Hands, published in England in 1865. I enlarged the engravings, reworked the drawings, and created an environment for the bird brooches while they are not being worn. The large etched place shows the entire scene of the birds in their habitats. The brooches are magnetically attached to the panel. Each piece is housed in a custom-made shadow box. This was the second piece in the book, Second Nature, Home. The panels are 9 inches tall. I went on to do a series of 4 birds. I was focusing on the female of each species, since the male always gets the attention. These are also panels with brooches magnetically attached. I was inspired by the beauty and simplicity of Japanese flower arranging and tried to capture that elegance in these pieces. I did a series of pieces titled Through My Window for Fachari Gallery in Seattle for a series of exhibitions where each artist was paired with an author or poet. I continued working with birds in their own habitats. Each bird was matched with an etching of their environment on the panel. The brooches are represented by a view through a window, and they're held in place by a small part on the panel that is attached with a rivet. This Baltimore oriole flies to its nest in a forest. These mourning doves are on a panel showing a farmhouse with a rail fence. These eastern bluebirds are in front of a southern plantation mansion with a picket fence. And this raven is in a graveyard with an old wrought iron fence. In 2001, I accepted an invitation to be in a Tiara exhibition at Velvet Da Vinci's gallery in San Francisco. My tiara was titled Beija-Flor, which is Portuguese for hummingbird. Directly translated, it means kiss the flower. The hummingbird is connected to a spring, allowing it to move above the trumpet blossoms when the wearer walks. And the piece on the left sold, and two people wanted it at the same time, so I offered to make a second one, but I wanted to make it different. So the second one is on the right. My vessels and containers come in many forms. This piece, Pigment Basket, which was made for a basket exhibition, shows 3 flowers whose stems reach down and dip into a bowl filled with the pigment matching their color. Each of these large vessels have birds peeking out of many leaves woven together to make the form. The interior of the vessel is like the scaffolding of a building. This talks about the delicate dance between the environment and how humans are altering it. These are birds of paradise. I picked up leaves like these while walking in the autumn. I laminated them to preserve their color so that I could use it as reference when I finished the piece. The bird are brown-nosed cuckoos. This piece is 10 inches tall and elliptical in form. And the third one of this series shows the eastern blue jay. While on sabbatical in 2015, I suddenly lost most of my hearing in my right ear. It is still unexplained to this day. I realized how mysterious the human ear is and how much we take our hearing for granted. This experience inspired a group of pieces talking about sound. When we use the word quiet, it can be in so many ways. You can yell quiet at a barking dog or whisper quiet so as not to wake a sleeping baby. The first piece of this series shows a lavender hibiscus I found outside a restaurant. It was so delicate and beautiful. It had many bees working around it as I watched. Hearing their buzzing was a gift. These flowers, nicknamed red hot pokers, are grown in gardens and even grow in the wild in California. I love the gradation of color and the tall, awkward stems with all the movable petals hanging off like wind chimes. The leaves are broad and sturdy, just right to hold 2 chairs for an intimate conversation, a whisper. An endangered moth quietly explores the base. These daisies conceal a small teapot on a table, which might be used for a time spent one-on-one with someone special. The teacups rest on the leaves. Another endangered moth rests on the side. When I had my initial ear problem, my balance was affected by vertigo. These pieces, Delicate Balance, are about balance and how delicate it can be. A moth, endangered in California, crawls onto a target symbol under a heavy pot barely held up by 2 chairs. This is the second piece about balance. Will these 4 chairs hold up this heavy pot while the endangered moth investigates below? This piece is now in the collection of the Hood Museum at Dartmouth College. I made 3 boxes for my sisters, each with their favorite flowers. The larger blue box shows fireflies. I loved them as a kid in Ohio, and I miss seeing them in California. Fast forward to March 2020. As I arrived at school, I was informed that we had to get off campus immediately, go home, and shelter in place. I had been through earthquakes, fires, and more, but this pandemic was new, bizarre, and alarming. Everyone's confusion and lack of understanding of the situation was unsettling. I felt for our students who were stuck in the dorms, families that could not visit loved ones in the hospital or nursing homes, and all the families who lost loved ones to this mysterious virus. I was compelled to respond, which led to these next 2 pieces. As I began to venture out in the beginning of the pandemic to get groceries or gas, I saw glazed eyes behind face masks. Smiles could no longer be seen in public. This piece is a chatelaine. Chatelaines were worn in Victorian times as a way for the mistress of the house to carry keys and other small utensils off a hook on her waistband. Some grew to be quite elaborate. They were like Victorian fanny packs. These pieces are intended to be worn off the belt or waistband and carry essentials like a face mask, gloves, and a tape measure. This chatelaine carries a face mask, gloves, and 2 small bottles of hand sanitizer for the cautious traveler. There's no denying it. Our lives have changed in many ways forever. This small suitcase has a jumbled map made of thermonite, a form of compressed paper. Inside the suitcase are names of cities made from an old yardstick. The red X asks the question, where is it safe to travel? The piece sits on an etched panel showing airplanes going in all directions. The small silver plane inside the lid is attached magnetically to the sky, painted on a steel plate, and can be moved around. During the pandemic, when traveling was not an option, many said they were staying home as a vacation or staycation. With all the distractions that come from being at home, it's hardly a vacation. The suitcase formed to fit a house sits on an etched panel with a checkerboard of things that distract at home. I'm including a view of my process and how I approach some of my work. It begins with a concept, usually building on a narrative, storytelling, documentation, recording history, and/or memories. That leads to the construction and then determining the color. The work must be finished before coloring. This shows the over 60 spiculum forms making up the petals to Quiet 2. Each one was attached to the main stem shown on the right. They are all movable. Sometimes my ideas come quickly and I can determine how to start. Other times I go through many papers, drawings, and planning. Models are vital in my process. I have many elements in my pieces, and the models provide a roadmap and patterns to follow. And I couldn't survive without tracing paper or masking tape. The internet provides much information for me, but my first choice of a source are my books. The wings on this piece are die-formed and chased before attaching them to the container. The image on the right shows the back of the container with the hook that goes over the belt or waistband. This is my bench where I spend most of my time. I have an inordinate love of hammers and pliers. We have a shed in our backyard where we do all of our soldering, etching, and more. And that's where I am right now. And this is another favorite quote. A meaning of a word to me is not as exact as the meaning of a color. Colors and shapes make more a definite statement than words. Georgia O'Keeffe. Jack and I will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary on August 20. And I enjoy the company of our Dalmatian Woody, who is 9. He's a constant source of entertainment. And many thanks to PaperWorks for your invitation to present my work today. And this is my favorite piece of jewelry. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Oh my goodness. That was an amazing talk. I have never seen anything like it, your work. So the chat box is fantastic, inspirational work. Humbled indeed. I'm going to open it up now to anybody who would like to unmute themselves and comment and say something or have questions for Marilyn.
Hi, Marilyn. This is Mara Crummins. I'm a longtime metalsmith, and it's an honor to hear you speak today and see your work. Just an FYI, I have a picture of the Devil's Garden in my studio at home. So you've been a longtime inspiration for me. Your pieces are beyond exquisite. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Questions, comments?
Yes, this is Rebecca Gans, and it may sound like a silly question, but your birds are so ornate that I'm wondering, do you make a mold and pour the liquid metal into it, or how do you make them?
The birds are carved out of wood. I had to teach myself how to do that. I use basswood, and I just do a real basic cut using a bandsaw. And then I start fine-tuning the form, and then the beaks and feet and wings are all made of metal in the eyes. And then I attach the wings with epoxy and rivets. And once I do that, I can use gesso on both surfaces and it unites them as one. And then I'm able to do the coloration.
My goodness.
all of the birds are made so that they can be detached from the piece, because I've learned, having shipped so many pieces over the years, that it's much safer if I can pack them separately, and then wherever they're going, they can put them together. So there's always some sort of technical stuff I have to do to make things come apart and go together.
Wow, you must be a very patient artist.
I guess I have learned that over the years.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Helen. I have 2 questions. One is, are the books actual books, and then you've just made a metal plate that is the name? And then the other question is, do you have a website or an email where we could contact you on our own?
Yes, the books are not functional. Those pages that you see are literally pieces of red oak flooring that I made into a C shape, I guess you could say, that fit exactly into that very heavy copper cover. So they do not open in any way, except for that one that was the pill box that you could pull out, the 7-day pill box. And yes, I have a website. It's MarilynDaSilva.com. And there is contact me.
And there's information on our webpage also about you with your webpage. Yes. And work. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Anybody else?
I loved listening to your meeting. You have so many amazing workshops coming up, and it made me wish I had time to do everything. I loved seeing those beautiful bindings that you showed in the very beginning. One of them opened up and little triangles turned into forms. I don't know if I'm describing it well, but everything you guys are doing is so amazing. And I love that there are groups like you around the country that are making it possible for others to learn these fascinating tips and processes.
Thank you. I would say it's a great group. It's just a creative, we get high off of each other's ideas and get inspired by each other. So it's great.
I had I was in a show at the Mesa Art Center, I believe it is, in their
Yes.
one of their
Phoenix.
galleries. And so I don't remember the year. It was probably maybe 10 years ago, but they showed all my books. But at the same time, in some of the other galleries, they had book sculptures, that people making stuff out of books, and also a lot of fascinating paper cuts pieces. And it was just so much fun to be part of all of that.
It complemented yours then, your book sculptures. Those are wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, I loved hearing about your life and what left you there. And are you getting a lot of rain right now up there? And
Boy, this is the first day we've had sunshine in 10 days.
oh, good, good.
I'm not complaining though. We need the rain, but maybe not quite so much all at once.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
in for another week of rain.
Yeah. So Marilyn, are you still teaching also?
I'm teaching. In fact, I have to start my first day of class is January 21st.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay. And are you also teaching classes online? Like I know Terry took a class from you. Is that different than what you're teaching?
Terry took the class at Picosin Arts, and I'm doing one this summer. It'll be the same class, working with gesso and colored pencil on metal.
Okay.
So you go to Picosin, and they offer a lot of interesting workshops.
Wonderful. Terry, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you so much for the inspiration, Marilyn. I cannot tell you how overwhelmed I am by your thoughtfulness and your incredible work. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thanks, Terry, and thanks for recommending me as a speaker.
Well, I'm hoping that some of the members of our Arizona Designer Craftsmen were able to come. I don't know if they were, but I thought they would really love it too. And I know it really inspires all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of friends with that group.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to thank Patty for those beautiful images. It just makes me think about what I'm trying to do with my work. Just little things that you have to look for that you don't see when you first walk up. Maybe turn away and you have to come back and say, wait a minute, did I see something there?
Yes, I do that. I'm walking and I walk away, and then it's like 5 feet down the trail, like, no, I have to go back.
Right. They were really beautiful, and I wish I could take your workshop.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, this has just been a great morning, and if you could tell your friends if they missed the meeting, we will get it up on our YouTube channel in a few days when I get around to it. And I'm going to look at the chat again too, and I can publish that with all of the things going on in PaperWorks. So a couple of things I just want to say, that Miriam is going to be doing a docent tour of Tahona Chul on the water exhibit, and that's Tuesday, January 17th at 11 p.m. if anybody could come. And again, if anybody wants to take the workshop today in Shirley Dornberg's place, please email or text Shirley and you will be in. So it's going to be a great workshop. I thank everybody for attending. We had 49 attendees, which is great. And so nice to see you all and to start the new year off on a creative edge. So you've inspired us all, Marilyn. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, see you next month. Live meeting February 9th at St. Francis Church. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.